On April 26, 2003, a man named Aron Ralston set out on what he thought would be just another solo hiking trip in the deserts of Utah. He was 27 years old, an experienced outdoorsman, someone who loved the wilderness and often went on adventures alone. That morning, Aron packed lightly. Just a burrito, some candy bars, a small bottle of water, his climbing gear, and a cheap multi-tool knife he'd picked up at a gas station. He didn't tell anyone where he was going, not his friends, not his family. In his mind, it was just a short trip into a familiar area, nothing dangerous. He figured he'd be back home that evening. The night before, he parked his pickup truck on the edge of the desert and slept in the back. Early the next morning, around 9:15 a.m., he hopped on his mountain bike and rode toward Blue John Canyon, a narrow, remote slot canyon surrounded by miles of sandstone and silence. Once he got to the canyon entrance, he locked his bike and continued on foot. The desert was quiet. The sun was already beating down. There were no other hikers. He was completely alone. After a couple of hours, he began making his way through one of the narrowest parts of the canyon. The walls on either side were tall, over 30 meters high, but the space between them was barely a meter wide. He squeezed through sideways at times, brushing up against the rock with every step. Then it happened. As he moved over a boulder wedged between the canyon walls, the rock suddenly shifted. Before he could react, it came loose. The 800-pound rock fell with him. In a matter of seconds, Aron was thrown down into a crevice about 2 feet deep, and the boulder crashed onto his right arm, pinning it against the canyon wall. Just like that, he was stuck. At first, Aron didn't panic. He was used to solving problems outdoors. He thought maybe he could wiggle his arm out, maybe chip away at the rock. But as the minutes turned into hours, reality started to sink in. The rock wasn't going to move. His arm was completely pinned, with no feeling in his fingers. It was crushed, stuck between a massive boulder and solid canyon wall. He tried everything he could think of. He pulled as hard as he could. He used his legs to push against the canyon wall for leverage. Nothing worked. The boulder didn't budge, not even a little. After a while, he took out his cheap multi-tool knife and began trying to chip away at the rock. But the blade was dull, not made for this kind of job. The rock was sandstone, which is softer than other types of stone. But still, after hours of scraping, he barely made a dent. The sun started to set. Temperatures dropped quickly in the desert. One moment it was burning hot. The next, it was freezing cold. Aron huddled into himself, trying to stay warm. He had no blanket, no tent, just the clothes he wore and the little food and water he'd brought. That first night, he didn't sleep much. He kept thinking, someone will come by in the morning. Someone will find me. But nobody came. Day 2. Aron knew he was in serious trouble now. He had brought only enough water for a few hours. The food wouldn't last long either. And he had made a critical mistake. No one knew where he was. He hadn't left a note. He hadn't told a friend. He hadn't signed in at any ranger station. He was completely off the grid. He tried everything again. Pull, chip, twist. He even built a small pulley system using rope from his climbing gear to try and lift or shift the rock. It didn't work. The sun came up again, bright and merciless. The canyon offered very little shade, and his skin began to burn. His lips cracked. His body started dehydrating. Still, he tried to stay calm, to think rationally. He rationed his water and tried to conserve energy. That night, he turned on his video camera. He looked straight into the lens and started talking to his family, just in case. He told them he loved them. He said he was sorry. He tried to explain what had happened. It was like leaving a final message, a digital goodbye. Then he went back to scraping at the rock. His hands were raw. The knife was duller than ever. Still, he kept going. Day 3. His strength was fading. The heat during the day and the cold at night were draining him. He was starting to lose hope. He hallucinated that people were coming down the canyon, rescuers, friends, strangers. But when he called out, there was only silence. He imagined he heard helicopters, but the sky above was empty, just a sliver of blue between the tall red canyon walls. By now, Aron had accepted that no one was coming. If he was going to get out of this alive, he'd have to do it himself. But how? The idea that had been sitting in the back of his mind for days, cutting off his own arm, started to move to the front. It wasn't just an option anymore. It was the only option. By the fourth day, Aron Ralston was running out of everything: water, food, and time. His body was weakening. His arm was swollen and gray, clearly dead. He hadn't urinated in hours, and when he did, it was dark and smelled bad. The only moisture he had left was his own urine, which he began drinking just to stay alive. He was now deep into survival mode. Still, Aron kept thinking about escape. The idea of amputating his own arm had been haunting him since day 2, but he hadn't dared to try. The pain, the risk, the sheer horror of it. But on day 4, it became more real. He looked at his arm and realized it was already gone. It had died days ago. He just hadn't detached it yet. That night, he had a dream, or maybe a hallucination. He saw a small boy, a future son, running to him. He wasn't sure if it was real or his mind breaking, but in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in days: purpose. He wanted to live. He wanted a future. And that meant he had to act. The next morning, day 5, he made the choice. He would amputate his arm and get out of that canyon, or he would die trying. He started by using his body weight to snap the bones in his arm. He wedged his arm against the rock and pushed with everything he had until he heard the sound. The crack of bone. The sound of freedom. Now came the hard part, cutting through the flesh, muscle, and nerves. All he had was that dull multi-tool knife, one he once joked about buying for $15 at a hardware store. It took time. It took focus. It took pain he didn't think was survivable. But he kept going. He described cutting through the nerves as like lighting a fire along my arm. White-hot, electric pain. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. He was almost free. Finally, after about an hour of self-surgery, Aron Ralston stood up in the canyon, free for the first time in 5 days. His right arm was gone. Blood was pouring from the wound, but he quickly wrapped it with climbing rope to make a tourniquet. He didn't stop to rest. He couldn't afford to. He was still over 10 miles from help. Aron began the long, painful climb out of the canyon. He had to rappel down a 65-foot wall using only one arm. He used his legs and hips for balance, guided himself slowly down the rope, step by shaky step. Once on the canyon floor, he started walking, bleeding, dizzy, weak but moving. After several hours, he stumbled upon a family who were hiking in the area. They immediately knew something was wrong. His appearance was shocking. Dirt-covered, sunburned, shirtless, missing an arm. He told them he needed help. One of them ran ahead to alert rescuers. 4 hours later, a helicopter arrived. Aron was airlifted out of the desert, alive. He had lost 40 pounds in 5 days. He'd survived on scraps and desperation, but he made it out. When the helicopter finally landed at the hospital, Aron was barely holding on. He had lost almost a quarter of his body weight and more than a liter of blood. The medical team moved quickly. They stabilized him, gave him fluids, stitched up what was left of his arm, and began the long process of helping him recover, physically and mentally. The doctors told him something shocking. If he had been rescued just 1 hour later, he likely would have died from blood loss or organ failure. His arm, the one he'd left behind under the boulder, was later recovered by park rangers. They actually returned to the canyon, moved the massive rock, and brought back what was left of it. Aron had asked for it. He wanted to be the one to bury it. That arm had saved his life by forcing him to make an impossible choice. He gave it a proper resting place. Aron's story quickly spread across the world. News outlets covered it. Talk shows invited him. People were shocked, inspired, moved. They wanted to know how someone could go through something like that and come out stronger. He didn't hide anything. He told the full truth about the fear, the mistakes, the hallucinations, and especially the moment he broke his own bones and cut through his arm to survive. He didn't try to make it sound heroic. He just told it how it really happened. In 2004, he published a book titled Between a Rock and a Hard Place. It became a bestseller. The book went into even more detail about his life before the accident, the choices that led him there, and what the experience taught him. Later, Hollywood came calling. In 2010, Aron's story was turned into a movie called 127 Hours, directed by Danny Boyle, the Oscar-winning director of Slumdog Millionaire. Actor James Franco played Aron in what would become one of the most intense survival films ever made. The movie was raw, realistic, and powerful. It stayed true to Aron's story and even included exact lines from the video messages he recorded in the canyon. It didn't glamorize what happened. It made audiences feel it. Every moment, every second of pain, fear, and determination. At film festivals, some people fainted during the amputation scene. Others cried. But most left the theater in awe of what one person could endure. Aron was involved in the film's production. He even acted as a consultant to make sure every detail was accurate. Today, Aron Ralston is more than a survivor. He's a motivational speaker, a mechanical engineer, an environmental advocate, and a father. Yes, he did have that child he dreamed of in the canyon. He travels around the world, sharing his story not to shock people, but to inspire them. His message is simple. We are capable of far more than we think. When things seem impossible, when we hit our lowest point, we can still find a way to survive, to fight, to live. He admits he made mistakes, not telling anyone where he was going, packing too little, going alone. But he also shows what happens when you take full responsibility and refuse to give up. He often says, "This is not a story about amputation. It's a story about freedom." Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to the Bur Storytelling channel so you won't miss the next stories. See y'all.